Okay, folks. We're going to need a flow chart for this one. Yeah, we're talking about Zi-O episode 21 and Lupinranger versus Patranger episode 50. And we're taking a break from the Whitewash Creating Gates Revive arc and back to the usual shtick for Zi-O. And today's Legacy Rider is Kamen Rider Ryuki. Or rather specifically, Kamen Rider Ryuga. Yeah, the another writer today isn't another Ryuki, it's another Ryuga. And but before we even get to that, we have to go and address the major elephant in the room. Ryuki and his faction of Kamen Riders don't exist anymore. Yeah, if anybody's actually seen Kamen Rider Ryuki, you should know by now that at the end of that series, the main villain, Shiro Kanzaki, basically used his powers of time travel to, well, essentially erase the events of the series from ever happening. Shiro and his sister Yui were, well, let's see, basically how things happened in the Ryuki, happened in Ryuki. Let's see, Shiro's sister Yui basically died from, well, okay, actually, hold on a second. Ryuki itself is kind of a contradictory, convoluted mess, mostly because of Toshiki Inoue and Yasuko Kobayashi kind of just pulling the series in whichever direction they were and having their little tug of war, and we were all caught in the crossfire. Although, yeah, since the writer today is another Ryuga, that establishes that the events of Kamen Rider Ryuki episode final are in fact the canon timeline now. The tie-in to Ryuki's movie that was written by Toshiki Inoue. In the events of that movie, it's revealed that Yui Kanzaki, the younger sister of Ryuki's main antagonist Shiro Kanzaki, died when they were young due to their parents' neglect. Well, okay, remembering now, she basically stayed in the mirror world for too long. Okay, gotta start again. Yeah, the mirror world was basically the main combat setting for Kamen Rider Ryuki. It's never quite explained whether Shiro discovered the mirror world, created it, or tapped into its power to create the 13 Advent decks for his Kamen Riders in order to propagate to start off the Rider War. Basically, Yui, when she was a little girl, she stayed in there for too long, and unless she merged with her mirror world self, she would die if she tried to return. But so she merged with her mirror world self, but added in a time limit that she would die on her 18th birthday. So basically, the entire point of Ryuki from episode final's perspective was that Shiro was trying to basically find he selected 13 Kamen Riders to find whoever would be the most powerful. That would basically serve as the catalyst for Yui having living past her 18th birthday. And yeah, with that established, there's there's our world and there's the mirror world, and there's mirror world counterparts, and that's where Ryuga comes in. Ryuga was the mirror world counterpart of Ryuki's protagonist Shinji Kido, and I say protagonist because as somebody who's seen Ryuki, Shinji more often than not led to some of the main villains of that show and some central antagonists get away with a lot of their crap because the guy was kind of an indecisive little twip. Yeah, in other words, get in the Rider War, Shinji. Ryuki is a very divisive series, and its endings and multiple continuities are one of the contributing factors to it. So with Zi-O, we're going with the notion that Ryuki's tie-in movie episode final is the canon ending, wherein in that movie, basically in that scenario, Shinji as Ryuki was able to destroy Dark Shinji, and thus he and Kamen Rider Knight Ren Amamiya, if I'm remembering the name right, were basically the de facto winners of the Rider War, but. Now, since Ryuki's timeline has been rewritten with the creation of another rider, or actually, wait, how? Well, okay, basically with the creation of, another Shinji, Dark Shinji was in the beginning of this episode, before the creation of the another Ryuga Ride Watch. So is episode final canon in this scenario or not? I'm really confused. I'm trying to figure this out here. Ugh. Well, anyways, long story short, thanks to a tip from Tsukasa, learned that he can access the mirror world through, well, basically by shattering a mirror 1,000 times, and basically just repeating it over and over again because, he's a time jacker, he can manipulate time. And so basically, he got into contact with Dark Shinji and basically made the sales pitch to him. And yeah, since Dark Shinji is, well, evil, if the word wasn't enough, he accepted the terms and has become another Ryuga who is now basically just running around and attacking anyone who is connected to the Ore Journal. Basically, people who read the website back in like 2002 or so before it shut down. And yeah, his two main. Well, okay, we haven't seen him go after Okubo, who was the chief editor in chief of the Ore Journal, who just makes a cameo appearance in this episode because hey, I was here. Well, anyways, yeah, Sogo and Gates are left to deal with the Ryuga, who keeps managing to escape them thanks to his ability to jump into any access the mirror world by jumping into any reflective surface. Okay, this confused me at first since I definitely remember with Ryuki's Kamen Riders, they can only enter and exit the mirror world through the same reflection. Like, say you were able to jump into the reflective surface on like a phone, or obviously a mirror over there. Yeah, if you go into the mirror world, you can only come back out through that mirror, and basically the opposite rules apply for Ryuga. Since Ryuga is a native of the mirror world, he can only enter the real world and go back into the mirror world through the same surface that he exited from. So, yeah, when we see him, when we see feedback footage from one of his attacks, he enters our world through through a set of mirrors, and then he goes back into the mirror world through the reflection in a car. Okay, well, going back to Ryuki again, the only riders in that series that could do that were the alternative riders, basically a bunch of bootleg rider belts created by an alternate faction that was trying to stop Shiro. Basically, just stop the Rider War. Forget the name of the guy, but he was connected with was one of the riders, Kamen Rider Tiger, and boy, yeah. Basically, the alternatives are the only ones that can enter and exit any reflective surface that they want without the limitation. I don't remember if Dark Shinji was also capable of doing that. But well, that's a whole other problem. Yeah, Ryuki as a series is kind of a bit of a mess, but it was actually a very inspirational series for basically helped shape the course of Kamen Rider for the majority of the first half of the Heisei era. Oh, and also Geno Nobuchi seems really, really obsessed with reusing Ryuki's plot points and doing them much better. His work with Fate Zero, his work with Kamen Rider Gaim, and of course Madoka Magica is basically Madoka Magica is basically Ryuki 2.0. Yeah, let's see. Candidates have a wish. They fight in order to fight. Their fights are tied into said wish, and also the end of the war, and also the potential end of the world. At least, yeah. Well, if you dig deep between Madoka and Ryuki, there's a lot of connections there. But okay, back on track here. All right, yeah. Basically, they figured out they managed to track down Shinji, who, my God, yeah, I hardly even recognized the guy. I mean, yeah. In addition to him cutting his hair and just time. Let's see. We last saw Shinji in like 2003, so like 16 or so years. Yeah. Oof. Anyways, yeah, they managed to track down Shinji, who who got wind that another Ryuga was running around because he's already covered up all the reflective surfaces in his apartment with newspaper, just like ironically how he stumbled across the Ryuki the Ryuki deck in the first place. And yeah, he was in critical condition because I'm guessing carbon monoxide or something like that. Or Gates and them think it's carbon monoxide, but either way, they get Shinji to a hospital, which then leaves the question of how Shinji is connected to another Ryuga. I mean, yeah, it's revealed later that okay, no wait, getting ahead of myself. Basically, Gates is starting to question what exactly the future that White Wasp is trying to create. Basically, he describes it as a world basically as it is right now, where time seems to stop. And yeah, it's pretty much the same fallacy as Schneisel for Code Geass. Basically, Schneisel was obsessed with preserving the world as it is. That if the future was just left up to people, then they would just screw things up. And yeah, I'm not exactly sure if that's what White Waz is going with. Basically, if the future of Gates Revive is basically just completely stays as it is, never changing, always just in a state of, well, basically limbo. And yeah, that leads Gates to, he already didn't trust White Waz as far as he could throw him, but yeah, that statement and his actions previously and following that conversation, yeah, Gates is probably not going to trust him unless he is probably, we already know he's going to gain the power of Gates Revive since, spoiler information and all that. It's his final form power up or whatever. And yeah, it's all just going to be decided on Oma Day. Basically, whether Sogo gains the power of Oma Zi-O, Gates gets all three of the future Ride Watches and becomes Gates Revive, or the Time Jackers created Invincible Another Rider. It all comes down to Oma Day. Not exactly. And speaking of Oma Day, that Ride Watch that Black Waz gave Sogo at the end of the last episode, it's the watch that apparently Sogo will activate on Zi-O Day and become Oma Zi-O. As it is right now, it will unlock the power of Zi-O 2. Basically his basically his super form. Aside from the Decade Ride Watch. Yeah, Decade Ride Watch was basically just an in-between form, and Zi-O 2 is his new super form. I mean, his definitive super form. Ugh, God, this is confusing. Anyways, yeah, Black Waz really, really wants Sogo to use that new Ride Watch, but Sogo, because Sogo's an idiot, he's pretty much gonna have no choice but to do it. Especially since, as it is right now, another Ryuga is just smacking Gates and Sogo and even White Waz from pillar to post. Yeah, the secret behind Ryuga another Ryuga is that he's actually he's actually Dark Shinji. Yeah, just like with the whole Shinobi fiasco, the Time Jackers have basically recruited an already existing Kamen Rider, in this case a past Kamen Rider, to become the Another Rider version of themselves. But whereas with Shinobi, he was basically he was the Another Rider version of a future protagonist Kamen Rider. We now actually have an instance, just like with when Dan Kuroto became Another Oz, of a previous Kamen Rider becoming Another Rider version of himself. Okay, I know that Kuroto became Another Oz, but you get what I'm talking about. It's basically the Another Oz and Another Shinobi scenarios mixed together, and thus we have Another Ryuga. And whether this means that he's the canonical Another Rider version of Ryuki, I'm not sure. I don't know if there is going to be another Ryuki, but yeah, regardless, another Ryuga is filling up the 2002 Kamen Rider time slot basically. And since he's a denizen from the mirror world, and since another Ryuga is one, a denizen of the mirror world, and two, based off of a Kamen Rider that no longer exists, and thus they can't go back to 2002 to create the Ryuki Ride Watch to defeat him, or the Ryuga Ride Watch, whatever. Yeah, long story short, as long as the real Shinji is alive, another Ryuga is invincible. So that was later on, just to prove how much of a sensible, peaceful guy he is, White Waz tries to kill Shinji. Although, as somebody who's seen Ryuki, this is actually kind of an ironically karmic thing. Yeah, since Shinji was indirectly responsible for lots of people dying, with him failing to stop the actual bad Kamen Riders in the Rider War. He was let's see. He basically let Oja get off scot-free whenever he wanted. He bought into Kamen Rider, to Tiger and the alternatives nonsense, and just didn't really do anything to actively stop Shiro and stop the Rider War. And now we have ourselves an invincible, psychotic another Rider out on the loose, and the only way to stop him, since there's no way to create a ride watch off of Ryuga, since again Ryuki was the de facto is the actual main Kamen Rider of 2002, is to kill Shinji. But yeah, anyways, and yeah, Sogo tries to chase after another Ryuga before he escapes into the mirror world again, but instead gets dragged there with him, where he encounters Dark Sogo, basically his mirror world version of himself, who definitely seems to be more like the guy that Black Waz is looking for. Yeah, Dark Sogo is he's a mirror flipped version of our Sogo. He definitely seems like the type of guy that would become the future tyrannical Zi-O. And yeah, Sogo's basically stuck with this guy. How is he? And the only way to exit the mirror world is through through another Ryuga. So yeah, they're kind of screwed here. Except, of course, for the Zi-O 2 ride watch that Sogo got from from Black Waz last time. If he uses that ride watch to defeat another Ryuga, he's going to take that one step closer to becoming Zi-O. Just according to Black Waz's plan. And this kind of leaves the question of where the Ryuki ride watch is going to come from, if another Ryuga is the one that's running around instead of another Ryuki. This is again trying to make sense. And apparently there's actually going to be a web show miniseries to try and explain how Ryuki is even still around in this timeline, because again, in the events of the actual show, the events of the Rider War that created Ryuki never happened. They were erased from history. So I just love to see how Toei's gonna pull that one off. If they're gonna say the events of episode final is the canon timeline, or something to do with the Rider worlds merging after decade, or just just figure it out for your own. Okay, on to something that's thankfully a little bit more simple. Lupinranger vs. Patranger episode 50, and where we finally see the Lupinrangers finally defeat Zamigo. Getting there is quite a bit of a trip. First things first, they have to figure out how, they gotta stall Zamigo long enough to get that collection piece off of him. The one that Ghosh installed inside of him. Even though, again, he still has the 2 gold safes on his side, so why did he need a 3rd safe installed in the back of him if he could just use them in his 2 double gold safes there where he usually gets his guns? Well, anyways, there's getting that collection piece back that removes his intangibility, and then there's making sure he doesn't use his ice guns anymore, that he, again, draws from his 2 gold safes that he uses as holsters. Alright, the solution to that, to the first one is actually is pretty simple. The Lupinranger. Okay, first things first. Backing up a bit. All right, Kairi is he is losing bad against Zamigo, and whereas meanwhile Umika and Tuma manage to escape from the hospital where they're being held at, and they sneak into Global Police headquarters to get their versus changers back, which is where they encounter Sakuya and Tsukasa. And those two, Sakuya and Tsukasa, basically have been on friendlier terms with the Lupinrangers as opposed to Keiichiro. And again, all 3 of the Patrangers have basically been, they've been doing a little bit of contemplating. And they do want to help them, while at the same time upholding their duties as global police officers. They know that Zamigo wronged the Lupinrangers personally. The Patrangers want to help, but again, the cops can't be openly seen helping out the Lupinrangers. They want to help, but they know they can't. It's a hedgehog's dilemma basically. It's kind of I know that we have seen the Lupin Rangers and the Patrangers team up a couple of times before, but and it did. They can't exactly go and help out the Lupin Rangers when Del Grandio is still running around just going on a rampage. And again, they have the Phantom Thieves in their sights. They know what the law requires them to do, but basically they just give them their versus changers back and just tells them to come back. Just make sure you come back alive. Yeah, they're risking the Lupin Rangers are risking their lives trying to get their loved ones back, and yeah, the Patrangers are still ashamed of themselves because if they knew what was happening, they could have tried to help before they became the Lupin Rangers. Basically, the Patrangers are kind of feeling massive amounts of guilt over this whole situation after the whole revelation. Yeah, just like with Keijiro, they're supposed to protect people. They could have done more. They should have done more, but they didn't know. They didn't have the power back then. Yeah, remember the Lupin Rangers were active for much longer than the Patrangers. The Patrangers only got their versus changers back in episode 1. So it's just frustrating for them all around. They want to help, but they can't. They can only give give the Lupin Rangers their moral support. But that's not the only thing they could give them. See, Noel actually has figured out a way to stop Zamigo's access to his ice guns. Basically, he figured out that since the dial fighters that the Lupin Rangers use to open up Ganglar safes, they figured that the Patrangers trigger machines can be used to lock the safes. And Noel gives them three of their gives the Lupin Rangers three of the trigger machines before they begin the final confrontation with Zamigo. But the Lupin Rangers, in a show of respect, give the Patrangers three of their dial fighters to try and crack Del Grandio's status gold physical protect vault. And yeah, speaking of, after they managed to get Zamigo's collection piece away from him, Zamigo is more than frustrated since Del Grandio showed up again and basically keeps inadvertently interrupting his game. So he asks Del Grandio to open up his safe and jump inside. Basically, since Del Grandio's status gold physical protect vault is basically a hammer space, he can fight the Lupin Rangers unimpeded, uninterrupted. He could just have all three of them to himself. And so, yeah, the fight's on, and the Lupin Rangers managed to pull it off. They used the trigger machines to lock down Zamigo's gold vaults, so he couldn't use his ice guns anymore. And yeah, Kairi finally manages to just blast a hole straight through Zamigo and kill him. And with Zamigo dead, all the victims of his freezing that haven't been made into disguises yet return to where they were when they were frozen, and they're freed, no harm, no foul. Although they've been in stasis for 2 years, so I'm betting there's going to be more than a bit of adjustment, a little bit of either way, they're safe and they're not going to have their skin ripped off and used as a suit for a Ganglar. So yeah, the Lupin Rangers are relieved that they finally managed to defeat Zamigo and free their loved ones. But yeah, now the Patrangers are stuck with Del Grandio, who again still has a massive amount of collection pieces inside of his vault, and he knows how to use them, and he's on the warpath and out for blood. Especially now that Zamigo's dead, he's basically the only Ganglar left, as far as we know. We know there's probably going to be more showing up in the Versus movie later on. But yeah, he's the last one, and he wants to play. So, yeah, although I'm going to drop a little bit of a theory here and figure out what they're going to do. Now that the Lupin Rangers are inside Del Grandio's vault, they're basically, and all their loved ones are safe, they have no reason to care about the collection pieces the pieces of the Lupin collection anymore. So most likely, while the Patrangers are fighting against Del Grandio, the Lupin Rangers are just going to be going around destroying all of Del Grandio's collection pieces, weakening him one by one, and potentially even risking themselves dying in the final fight. unless they can open up Del Grandiose Vault. Again, that's just a theory I have. We'll see how things play out in a couple of days. So yeah, for a final fight scene, yeah, it was good. It was really good. And yeah, knowing that, well, okay, when originally it was introduced that Zamigo's victims weren't dead, but basically literally kept on ice. I was me and a lot of the fandom were kind of disappointed that they weren't actually dead. But thankfully, the revelation of what they did with the frozen and the kidnapping victims, well, yeah, they still put them in danger, but and yeah, we already know that the Ganglars still, thanks to Zamigo and several other Ganglars who were involved with kidnapping incidents, have killed a lot of people. So yeah, still put the terror of the Ganglars and Zamigo back on. Just kind of different, but well, anyways, yeah. Zamigo was a sadistic psychopath, and yeah, it was gratifying to see Keiichiro just literally blow a hole in him. Alright, so yeah, Zi-O is incredibly confusing and head scratching. Lupinranger versus Patranger is much more simple, but thankfully, simple doesn't mean, dumb. It just means, it's less complicated. So yeah, next week we continue on with the Ryuga arc, and we finally end Lupinranger versus Patranger, where I'll probably give my thoughts on the series in preparation for the 4-week Super Sentai miniseries before the official debut of Ryu Soldier. So yeah, till then, bye bye!